My siblings excluded me from their weddings, so I returned the favor growing up as the youngest in a family of 5. I always looked up to my older siblings. They were my heroes, my guides, and my source of inspiration. Leonardo, Fernando, Beatrice, and Gustavo were the cool older siblings every kid dreamed of having. Yet, as much as I admired them, I often felt like an afterthought. This became painfully clear when they each decided to exclude me from one of the most significant days of their lives, their weddings. Leonardo was the first to tie the knot. I was 10 years old, full of excitement, and completely infatuated with the idea of attending a wedding. I remember sneaking into my mom's closet to try on her heels, pretending I was a glamorous guest. My fantasies were crushed when I learned that Leonardo's wedding would be child-free. It wasn't just me and no children were allowed, but that didn't soften the blow. I had hoped that being his sister would make me an exception, but I was wrong. I adored his wife, Clara, and had even memorized a little speech I wanted to give them at the reception. But instead of attending, I stayed home, watching Disney movies and imagining what the wedding might be like. At 10, I didn't fully understand adult decisions, but I knew how rejection felt. 2 years later, it was Fernando's turn. By then, I was 12, polite, mature, and desperate to be included. I thought, surely, being the youngest sibling meant something, right? Wrong again. His wedding was also child-free, and my invitation never came. Instead of dressing up and celebrating, I stayed home once more, wondering why my presence didn't matter to them. When Beatrice announced her engagement, I held onto a sliver of hope. By then, I was 15, practically a grown-up in my eyes. Initially, she planned to include everyone, but relatives convinced her otherwise. "It'll be more refreshing without kids running around," they said. I begged Beatrice to reconsider, reminding her that I wasn't just any child, I was her sister. Her response was cold and final. "If I make an exception for you, I'll have to do it for others. It wouldn't be fair." I'll never forget how I felt that day. Heartbroken and humiliated, I lashed out, yelling about how unfair it was to be excluded again. Instead of understanding, my parents grounded me for 6 months. Their reasoning? I was being dramatic. No one cared how I felt, and that wound stayed with me. By the time Gustavo got married, I was 17. I had given up hope by then, and as expected, there was no invitation. What stung even more was seeing our cousin, who had just turned 18, invited while I was left out. I sent a simple text congratulating him and moved on. When my parents scolded me for not being more enthusiastic, I brushed it off. I was tired of fighting battles I could never win. Years passed, and the pain of being excluded faded into the background, though it never truly disappeared. Then came my turn. When my fiancé, Alex, proposed, I was ecstatic. For once, the spotlight was on me, and I was determined to make my wedding day about joy and love, not family politics. As we planned the guest list, the question of inviting my siblings came up. My initial instinct was to include them, but then I remembered the heartbreak of being excluded from their weddings. If they didn't think I was important enough to be part of their special days, why should they be part of mine? I made my decision. No invitations for them. The drama began almost immediately. My siblings noticed the lack of invitations and flooded the family group chat with passive-aggressive messages. Beatrice asked, "Was there a problem with the mail?" Fernando took a more direct approach. "Why didn't we get an invitation to your wedding?" I ignored them. Then came the inevitable call from my mother. Her voice was sharp, dripping with disapproval. Mariana, why didn't you invite your siblings? What's wrong with you? I stayed calm, even though my heart was pounding. Mom, they didn't invite me to their weddings. I thought it was only fair to return the favor. There was a long, stunned silence before she exploded. Is this Alex's idea? He's changed you. You used to be such a sweet girl, but now you're acting like a bitter stranger. I sighed. This isn't about Alex. It's my decision. They didn't think I was important enough back then, so I don't see why they should be included now. She hung up in anger. Classic mom behavior. Leonardo was the next to confront me. His message was laced with condescension. Mariana, I know you were hurt about not being invited to my wedding, but you were a child. It wasn't personal. I thought you'd be over it by now, I replied. It's not about being over it, Leonardo. It's about principles. If I wasn't important enough to be at your weddings, why should you be at mine? He called me a spoiled brat and accused me of prioritizing resentment over family. Funny how they suddenly cared about family now that it suited them. Things escalated when my parents staged an intervention at my house. They showed up unannounced, their faces tight with disapproval. My mother wasted no time laying on the guilt. What will people think of us, Mariana? What kind of person doesn't invite their own siblings to their wedding? That's when I snapped. I was a child when I begged to attend their weddings, and you all called me dramatic. Now that I'm an adult, you want to rewrite history? No, they're not coming, and if you keep pushing, you don't have to come either. They stormed out, slamming the door behind them. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, my siblings bombarded me with manipulative messages. Beatrice even tried to guilt trip me, saying her kids were excited to attend. I ignored them all. On the day of my wedding, I felt nothing but peace. The ceremony was beautiful, filled with love, laughter, and genuine support. For the first time, I was surrounded by people who truly cared about me, and I didn't miss my family one bit. After the wedding, I found out that my mother had hosted an alternative dinner for my siblings on the same day as a form of silent protest. I laughed when I heard about it. How petty could they be? Standing my ground wasn't easy, but it was worth it. For the first time in my life, I chose myself over their expectations. My wedding day was about love, not resentment, and it was the most liberating feeling in the world. Not only had they intruded on a moment I had intentionally excluded them from, but they also criticized something they hadn't even experienced. Their audacity was unmatched, and it took everything in me to remain composed. As I scrolled through their snide comments, I clenched my jaw, willing myself to ignore them. But the sting of their words lingered, like tiny barbs tearing at the edges of my peace. The final straw came when my mother called me. Her voice was sharp, her tone laced with indignation, and she wasted no time on pleasantries. Mariana, what was that wedding? I saw the pictures, she began, her voice rising with each word. I honestly expected more from you. Everything looked so simple, nothing like your siblings' weddings. And that dress? You deserved something more glamorous. Why wasn't it in a church? Your sister's wedding was so much nicer. That ceremony didn't seem worthy of our family. For a moment, I sat there, stunned. Not because I agreed with her, but because of her sheer audacity. How could she speak with such venom about a day that wasn't hers to critique? I fought to keep my composure, inhaling deeply as her words echoed in my ears. When I finally responded, my voice was cold and steady, each word deliberate. Mom, the only thing unworthy here is you, I said, my tone sharper than I intended. You weren't invited, yet you feel entitled to judge. If you didn't like it, perfect, it wasn't planned for you. Her irritation was palpable through the phone, but she didn't back down. You're being selfish, Mariana, she snapped. We're your family. Do you really think you can just exclude us? That's not normal. You've always been resentful, and now you're taking it out on us. What did we ever do to deserve this? I couldn't take it anymore. The dam broke, and years of suppressed anger spilled out. What did you do? Let's refresh our memories, I shot back, my voice rising with every word. You ignored me during the most important moments of my life. I wasn't even important enough to attend my own siblings' weddings. And now, you expect me to include you in mine? That's hypocrisy. You know what would have truly ruined my wedding? Inviting you. There was silence on her end, but I hoped just for a moment that maybe, just maybe, she finally understood. Instead, she sighed heavily, her tone now dripping with disdain. You're ungrateful, she said, her voice trembling with frustration. We did everything for you, and this is how you repay us. Abandoning your family for a man you barely know? You'll regret it. I couldn't bear to listen anymore. Without another word, I hung up. I was done arguing with someone who refused to take accountability for their actions. But the drama didn't end there. My siblings, fueled by my mother's indignation, turned the family group chat into their battleground. You've destroyed this family, Mariana. Congratulations, wrote Beatrice, her words cutting like a knife. Fernando chimed in next, his flair for theatrics on full display. I hope that husband of yours is worth it because you've lost all of this for him. I read each message in silence, my hands trembling with a mix of anger and sadness. My husband, sensing my turmoil, sat beside me, gently squeezing my hand in support. Without a word, I left the group chat. Engaging with them wasn't worth the emotional toll. In the days that followed, the onslaught continued. Private messages, missed calls, even letters left at my doorstep. I ignored them all, but the weight of their accusations still lingered. Then, one day, my mother showed up at my door unannounced. Mom, there's no point, I told her firmly through the door. All you do is criticize and belittle me. I don't want that in my life anymore. You're being childish, she shouted back. Family is forever, Mariana. You can't just cut us out because you're hurt. I opened the door just enough to meet her gaze, my resolve unshaken. Family should mean support, respect, and love, not manipulation and constant criticism. If that's all you have to offer, then yes, I can cut you out. And I will. Her protests fell on deaf ears as I closed the door, shutting out her words and her presence. It was one of the hardest things I'd ever done, but it was necessary. Since that day, I've cut off all contact. Every attempt they've made to reach out has been met with more accusations and guilt trips. I no longer had the patience or energy for any of it. My life now revolves around my husband and the love we share. Together, we've built a relationship grounded in respect, understanding, and mutual support, the very things my family never gave me. For the first time in my life, I felt free. Free to be myself, free to live without the constant fear of judgment or criticism. Recently, something extraordinary happened. I found out I was pregnant. The moment I saw the positive result, tears of joy streamed down my face. My husband wrapped me in his arms, his voice soft and filled with emotion as he whispered, We'll raise this baby with so much love they'll never feel anything but cherished. We knew from the start that our child would only be surrounded by people who truly cared. That meant my family would have no part in their life. I wouldn't risk exposing my child to the toxicity I endured growing up. Of course, news of my pregnancy spread quickly. My mother was the first to reach out, her message as predictable as ever. Mariana, I heard you're pregnant. Despite everything, we're your family, and it's important for the baby to have their grandparents. I didn't reply. My husband and I had already made the decision. Our child's happiness and well-being came first, and that meant keeping them away from negativity. More messages followed from my siblings. Congratulations, wrote Beatrice. Despite everything, we're still siblings. You'll need support, and we're here for you. Fernando's message was blunt, as always. Hold your grudge if you want, but at least let us meet our nephew. He deserves to know he has a big family. Each message felt like a test of my resolve. My husband, ever my anchor, held my hand and said, "You don't owe them anything. This is our moment. Focus on us and the baby." He was right. A week later, my mother showed up again, desperate to plead her case. "You can't do this, Mariana. This baby is a part of us too," she said, her voice trembling. I stood firm, my voice steady as I replied. "You never acted like family," I said. "I won't let my child go through what I did. They'll grow up surrounded by love, not manipulation or criticism." Her tears, though dramatic, didn't move me. I closed the door, leaving her outside once again. Since then, their attempts to contact me have continued, but they no longer hold power over me. My focus is on my growing family, the life I've always dreamed of, filled with love, respect, and true happiness. Some might call it selfish, but I call it survival. For the first time, I'm protecting my peace, my happiness, and my future. And as I cradle my growing belly, I know with absolute certainty that I've made the right choice. This is the life I've chosen, a life where love outweighs obligation, where respect replaces resentment, and where happiness isn't conditional. This is my family now.